Ladies and gentlemen, isolation is the setup for revelation. There are moments in life when a man finds himself completely alone, not the kind of alone where your phone is quiet for a day, or when friends are too busy to hang out, but a deeper, heavier kind of solitude. The kind where you look around and realize nobody truly sees you, nobody really hears you, and the people you thought would stand beside you have either left or faded away without explanation. It's a silence that screams louder than any noise, a loneliness that settles deep into your bones. And in that silence, in that isolation, something begins to happen. A man begins to hear the one voice that had always been there but had been drowned out by the clamor of opinions, expectations, and distractions. People fear isolation because it strips away the comfort of being understood, the warmth of companionship, and the reassurance of validation. It's human nature to cling to others for identity and affirmation. We feel safer when we're part of a group, when our beliefs and decisions are mirrored by those around us. But what happens when all of that is taken away? What happens when life pulls you into a wilderness where no one follows, where no voice but your own and the voice of God remains? That's where the real transformation begins. Isolation is not a punishment, it's a process. It's a sacred space where revelations are born and identities are rebuilt. In the absence of noise, you're forced to confront yourself. You're faced with your fears, your insecurities, your doubts. Everything you managed to avoid while surrounded by people comes rushing to the surface. The opinions you depended on for direction are gone. The people who once shaped your narrative are silent. And in that raw, unfiltered space, you begin to hear something else. It's in those dark, lonely nights when sleep evades you and the weight of your thoughts feels unbearable that you catch the whisper of God. Not in thunderous proclamations, not in blinding visions, but in a still, small voice that speaks to your soul. Some of the greatest figures in history, both spiritual and secular, discovered their purpose in isolation. It's in isolation that Moses met God in a burning bush, away from the crowds and the comforts of home. It's in the wilderness that David learned to lean on God, not in the palace, but while tending sheep and hiding in caves. Jesus himself retreated into the wilderness for 40 days, stripped of companionship and earthly comforts, to commune with God and face the very temptations that would test his calling. Isolation isn't a detour on the path to destiny, it's part of the path itself. When a man is left with no one but God, he learns what it means to depend not on the affirmation of others, but on divine assurance. He starts to discern between what he thought he needed and what he truly needs. The relationships, titles, and distractions fall away, leaving behind only what is essential. It's in this sacred stripping away that a man discovers his authentic self, the version not built by societal expectations or shaped by public opinion, but crafted by the hands of God. The wilderness reveals what comfort concealed. There's something about suffering in silence that produces clarity. When no one is around to pat you on the back or wipe your tears, you realize who's really carrying you. And it's there, in the deepest, most desolate moments, that God begins to reveal not only who He is, but who you are. It's in isolation that God downloads the blueprints of your destiny, visions that are too heavy for casual conversations and too sacred for the company of the unprepared. Some revelations aren't meant for crowded rooms or social media captions. They are birthed in solitude, wrapped in silence, and carried in the heart until their appointed time. People often misinterpret isolation as rejection. They believe being left out, overlooked, or abandoned is a sign of failure or unworthiness. But sometimes God isolates you because He's preparing you for something the people around you aren't qualified to handle. Not everyone can handle your purpose, and not everyone is meant to witness your process. There are seasons where God has to separate you to elevate you, to purge you of attachments that would compromise the calling on your life. It hurts, it's uncomfortable, and it feels unfair, but in hindsight, you'll realize it was necessary. There's a certain strength that can only be forged in solitude, a resilience that comes from knowing you survived not because of human help, but because of divine intervention. When no one was there to encourage you, and you had to encourage yourself, when no one believed in your dreams, and you had to carry the vision alone, that kind of strength isn't loud or boastful, it's steady, unshaken by external circumstances, because it was built in the secret place. It's a quiet confidence that comes from enduring storms no one knew you faced and standing firm in battles no one saw you fight. Isolation is a mirror. It shows you who you really are when titles, relationships, and accomplishments are stripped away. It reveals the cracks in your character and the unhealed wounds you buried beneath busyness. It forces you to confront the uncomfortable questions. Who am I when no one's watching? What do I believe when no one's cheering me on? Where do I turn when every door closes? And in answering those questions, you begin to find the unshakable foundation that only God can provide. When a man reaches the point where he has no one but God, he is finally in the position to receive the revelations that will redefine his future. Not because God wasn't speaking before, but because now the man is finally listening. The distractions are gone, the noise has faded, and in that stillness he realizes that what felt like abandonment was actually alignment. What seemed like isolation was divine orchestration. It was God setting the stage, clearing the room, and preparing to deposit something in him that couldn't be contaminated by public opinion or compromised by misplaced loyalty. When people walk away, God steps in. Life has a way of revealing the hearts of those around you, especially in times of hardship, failure, or uncertainty. It's easy for people to stay close when things are going well, when your name is being praised, when your pockets are full, and your life looks admirable from the outside. But the true test of relationships comes when the applause dies down, when the resources run dry, and when the storms hit without warning. Suddenly, the ones you thought would be there forever start to disappear. The ones who claimed loyalty begin to fall silent. The people you leaned on start finding reasons to distance themselves. It feels like betrayal. It feels like rejection. It feels personal. And in those moments of loneliness and abandonment, it's easy to question your worth, your decisions, and even your future. But what if the very people who walked away were never meant to stay? What if their absence was part of a divine strategy to create space for something greater? Often, we hold on tightly to relationships, friendships, and connections out of habit, history, or fear of being alone. We tell ourselves that certain people are essential to our growth and success because they've been part of our story for so long. Yet, not everyone who starts with you is meant to finish with you. Some connections are seasonal, some are lessons, and some are obstacles disguised as companions. When God has a greater plan for your life, He sometimes allows people to exit because their presence would limit your elevation. The pain of people leaving can be blinding. It clouds your ability to see purpose in the departure. It makes you wonder why people you supported in their lowest moments are suddenly absent in yours. You start to replay every conversation, every shared memory, searching for where things went wrong. But often nothing went wrong, things simply shifted. Destiny has a way of disrupting comfort zones, and while you're clinging to familiar faces, God is trying to position you for something unfamiliar but necessary. Some people are tied to the version of you that can no longer exist in the place God is calling you to. Their mindset, their expectations, and even their loyalty are attached to who you used to be, not who you're becoming. There are moments in life when isolation is disguised as rejection. It feels like loss, but it's really protection. God knows the conversations you didn't hear, the intentions you couldn't discern, and the plans that were never spoken aloud. He sees the unseen and hears the unspoken, and sometimes removing people from your life is His way of safeguarding your destiny. The very people you were grieving over might have been the ones holding you back, not out of malice, but because their vision for you was too small. Their understanding of your potential was too limited, and if left unchecked, they would have continued to tether you to a version of yourself that was comfortable but incomplete. When people walk away, it exposes who your true source is. We often lean so heavily on human relationships for validation, encouragement, and security that we forget who the true sustainer is. The departure of people forces you to look upward. It forces you to rely on the one constant that has never wavered, never left, and never failed. God becomes more visible in the absence of distractions. His voice becomes clearer when the noise of human opinion fades. His presence feels closer when you realize that the shoulders you used to lean on are no longer available. It's in those moments that God steps in, not as a last resort, but as the main source. He steps in to heal the wounds of betrayal, to fill the voids left by broken relationships, and to affirm your worth in ways no human validation ever could. The loss of people becomes the doorway to a deeper relationship with Him. It's not about replacing what was lost, but about revealing what was always there. God was always enough, but sometimes it takes the absence of others to realize that truth. This divine replacement isn't always immediate. There are seasons where God leaves the space empty on purpose, not because He enjoys your pain, but because in that emptiness you learn endurance. You learn to stand alone. You learn to pray with tears in your eyes and a broken heart in your chest. You learn to find joy without an audience and to celebrate victories no one else witnesses. And it's in those private victories that God strengthens you for the public ones to come. Some doors have to close for new ones to open. Some relationships have to end for new purpose, aligned ones to begin. If you keep clinging to what left, you'll miss what's on the way. God doesn't subtract without the intention to multiply. He doesn't allow departure without preparing an arrival. The people who walked away created space for divine connections you haven't even imagined yet. The empty seats in your life aren't signs of failure. They're reserved spots for destiny partners, people who will challenge you, sharpen you, and see you as God sees you. Even the pain of abandonment serves a purpose. It humbles you. It reminds you that human loyalty is fragile, but divine faithfulness is unshakable. It teaches you to love without attachment and to give without expectation. You begin to understand that the approval you sought from people is already guaranteed in God. You don't need a crowd to be validated, a platform to be impactful, or constant affirmation to stay the course. What you need is alignment with the one who assigned you. When people walk away, it strips away the illusions you had about control. You realize you can't force anyone to stay, support, or believe in you, and in surrendering that need, you gain freedom, the freedom to walk boldly even if you walk alone, the freedom to chase purpose without waiting for permission, the freedom to trust that if God allowed them to leave, it was for your good. Not everyone will understand your journey, and they're not meant to. Some were only assigned to a chapter, not the whole book. And when their part is over, clinging to them only delays the next scene God is trying to write. Brokenness births unshakable faith. There's a level of trust, a depth of belief, and a kind of resilience that can only be developed through pain. Most people want strength without struggle, growth without discomfort, and wisdom without experience, but life doesn't work that way. It's often in the seasons when everything falls apart that the foundation of true, unwavering faith is laid. When a man is broken, stripped of everything he once depended on, and left with nothing but his breath and his God, something inside him shifts. It's in those moments of deep anguish, where prayers turn into cries and hope feels like a flicker, that faith moves from being a concept to a lifeline. People don't build unshakable faith on mountaintops. They build it in valleys. They build it in the nights when sleep won't come, and in the mornings when getting out of bed feels impossible. They build it when betrayal stings, when loss feels unbearable, and when the future looks like an endless void. In those moments, faith becomes less about reciting scriptures and more about survival. It becomes the thing you cling to when your logic fails, when advice falls short, and when no human presence can reach the depths of your despair. Brokenness has a way of stripping away illusions, tearing down walls, and forcing you to face truths you'd rather avoid. When you're broken, you realize how fragile your control over life really is. The plans you made, the relationships you relied on, and the things you thought would always be there begin to vanish, and in that void you either fall into hopelessness or reach for something greater than yourself. That reaching is where unshakable faith begins. It's not born from comfort. It's not nurtured by ease. It's forged in the fires of adversity, where every step forward feels like a battle and every breath is a silent prayer. The kind of faith that moves mountains isn't the faith of the untested, it's the faith of those who have walked through hell and came out carrying scars instead of chains. Brokenness introduces you to a version of yourself you didn't know existed. It reveals strengths you didn't know you had and exposes weaknesses you could no longer afford to ignore. It's humbling, it's raw, and it's honest. In those moments, you stop pretending, you stop performing, and you start being real with yourself and with God. It's in brokenness that faith becomes personal, no longer inherited from family tradition, no longer borrowed from Sunday sermons, but forged in your own tears and prayers. It's the kind of faith that whispers, "I don't understand this, but I trust you anyway." It's the faith that says, "Even if I have to crawl, I won't quit." That's not ordinary faith, that's unshakable. One of the greatest misconceptions people carry is that brokenness is a sign of weakness. In truth, it's often the birthplace of greatness. Every powerful, purpose-driven individual has a story of being shattered. The difference is they didn't stay broken. They allowed their pain to become a platform and their wounds to become wisdom. They realized that what tried to destroy them was actually shaping them, and in that realization, faith grew, not the kind of faith that demands answers, but the kind that finds peace without them, the kind of faith that holds on when everything else falls apart. There's a sacredness to broken places. It's where pride dies and humility rises. It's where self-reliance crumbles and dependency on God strengthens. In those places, you learn to pray differently, not with rehearsed words or polished phrases, but with honesty. You say, "God, I'm hurting. God, I'm lost. God, I need you." And it's in those honest moments that heaven responds, not always with immediate solutions, but with strength for the next step, peace that makes no sense, and a presence that holds you together when everything else is falling apart. Unshakable faith isn't loud. It doesn't always look like bold declarations or public displays. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's the decision to get up one more time. Sometimes it's choosing hope when logic says give up. It's the kind of faith that builds in secret, in the unnoticed corners of life where no one sees your struggle and no one applauds your perseverance. But those moments are sacred. That's where the roots go deep. That's where resilience is born, and one day what was built in brokenness will become the strength others lean on. The beauty of brokenness is that it makes room for God to rebuild, not in the image of what was lost, but in alignment with what was always meant to be. It clears away what was unnecessary, what was temporary, and what was toxic. It creates space for authenticity, for purpose, and for divine alignment, and while the process is painful, the outcome is priceless. Faith that has been tested in fire doesn't crumble under pressure. It stands not because the storm was easy, but because the foundation was made unshakable through it. Every scar tells a story of survival. Every tear shed in private strengthens resolve, every unanswered question deepens trust, and every broken piece eventually finds its place in the masterpiece being created. Faith built in brokenness doesn't look for perfection. It expects the storm and trusts the one who controls it. It walks forward with trembling hands but steady steps, because it remembers what it survived and knows what it's capable of enduring. Your lowest moment reveals your highest source. It's easy to have faith when everything is falling into place, when your plans unfold smoothly, and when the people around you offer love, support, and encouragement. It's simple to believe in purpose when the path ahead is clear and the resources you need are at your fingertips. But the true test of who and what you depend on comes when life strips you of your comforts, when the people you counted on disappear, and when everything you thought you needed crumbles around you. It's in those moments, the ones where you hit rock bottom, where the tears won't stop, where the nights feel endless, that you discover the source you've truly been leaning on. Most people go through life unaware of how much of their identity, security, and peace is tied to external things. Jobs, titles, relationships, financial stability, physical health, and public approval quietly become the foundation of their confidence. Without realizing it, these things start to define how they see themselves and measure their worth. But what happens when those things are taken away? What happens when the job ends, the relationship breaks, the health fades, or the applause stops? That's when the real revelation comes. That's when you find out where your true source lies. Hitting your lowest moment is often the beginning of clarity. In those places where life feels unfair, where prayers seem unanswered, and where loneliness creeps in, illusions are shattered, you can no longer pretend to be strong on your own. You realize how limited your power is and how fragile your sense of control was all along. The things you thought were holding you together start to unravel, and what's left is a raw, vulnerable version of yourself, stripped of pretense and forced to confront the truth. And it's in that stripped down, exposed state that you begin to seek something deeper than temporary comfort or human reassurance. Your lowest moment isn't meant to destroy you, it's meant to redirect you. It's life's way of pulling back the curtain and showing you that what you thought was your source was only a resource. Jobs can be lost, people can leave, opportunities can fade, but God remains. He's the only source that doesn't run dry, the only foundation that doesn't crack under pressure, and the only presence that doesn't vanish in the storm. Sometimes it takes losing what you thought you couldn't live without to realize that you were never meant to depend on it in the first place. In moments of deep loss, people often search for quick fixes, distractions to numb the pain, or temporary solutions to fill the void, but none of it lasts, because what you need in your lowest moment isn't another temporary fix. You need a steady source. One that remains when the world feels unstable, one that speaks peace in the middle of chaos, one that reminds you who you are when life tries to convince you otherwise. That source is God. Not religion, not ritual, but a real, unshakable relationship with the Creator who knew you before you were formed and who holds your future even when you can't see past the next hour. Rock Bottom introduces you to the Rock of Ages. It takes you from reciting faith to living it. It takes you from casual belief to desperate dependence. When no one has the answers you need, when friends don't have the words to comfort you, and when your strength runs out, you reach for the one source that can't be exhausted. And it's there in the silence, in the stillness, in the loneliness that God meets you, not always with immediate solutions or explanations, but with a presence so steady, so undeniable, that it reminds you you're not as alone as you feel. Your lowest moments also reveal the misplaced dependencies you didn't even realize you had. It shows you the people you elevated too high, the possessions you valued too deeply, and the titles you believed you needed to feel significant. Pain has a way of stripping away what's unnecessary and leaving you with what's essential. And in that essential space, you discover a strength you didn't know existed, not because you suddenly became stronger, but because you tapped into a source greater than yourself. There's a certain wisdom that only comes from surviving your lowest points. It teaches you to stop placing your identity in things that can be taken away. It teaches you to hold loosely to what you have and to trust deeply in who holds you. It teaches you that peace isn't found in predictable circumstances, but in the presence of an unchanging God. And once you've learned that, once you've experienced His provision and comfort in your darkest hours, you carry a kind of confidence that isn't easily shaken. You realize that if you made it through that night, that season, that heartbreak, you can make it through the next. Not because life is suddenly easier, but because your source is steady. You stop fearing loss because you understand that even in loss, you're never truly empty. You stop chasing validation because you've already been affirmed. You stop trying to control outcomes because you've seen what happens when you let go and trust the one who sees what you can't. That kind of perspective is priceless. It changes how you walk through life. You're no longer impressed by temporary highs or defeated by temporary lows because you've experienced both and discovered the one constant in them all. You don't break as easily because you know what held you the last time you shattered. You don't panic as quickly because you remember who carried you when you could no longer carry yourself. And you don't compromise as easily because you've learned that your highest source can only be found when you've reached your lowest moment. A man's destiny is safest in God's hands, not man's. People will often applaud you when it benefits them, support you when it's convenient, and walk with you when the road is easy. But when storms rise, when circumstances change, or when your journey challenges their comfort, that support begins to fade. Human loyalty is unpredictable. One day you're celebrated, the next you're criticized. One season you're surrounded, the next you're alone. And if your destiny is tied to the approval, acceptance, or assistance of people, it remains at the mercy of their shifting emotions, limited understanding, and personal agendas. But when your destiny is placed in God's hands, it's secure, untouchable by opinion, unshaken by betrayal, and unaltered by circumstances. People often place their future in the hands of others without realizing it. Seeking validation, waiting for permission, craving applause, and needing constant reassurance from those around them. It's a subtle thing. It starts with small decisions made to please others, opinions adjusted to fit in, dreams reduced to avoid criticism. Slowly, without meaning to, a person can hand over the steering wheel of their destiny to people who have no real investment in their future. And when those people disappear, disappoint, or turn against them, it leaves them feeling lost, broken, and purposeless. But destiny was never meant to be fragile. It was designed by the Creator of the universe, formed before you ever took your first breath, and woven into the very fabric of who you are. No person, circumstance, or mistake has the authority to erase what God has written over your life. What He ordains, no one can override, and though life will present trials, delays, and detours, the final outcome rests in hands far more capable and faithful than any human could ever be. God's plan doesn't expire because of temporary setbacks, and it doesn't crumble under the weight of human disapproval. When a man understands that his destiny is safest in God's hands, he walks differently. Not with arrogance, but with a quiet confidence. He stops chasing people who were never assigned to his future. He stops begging for opportunities that were never meant for him. He stops shrinking himself to fit into rooms God never called him to occupy. And instead, he begins to focus on alignment, on character, and on preparation for what is ahead. Because when destiny is placed in divine hands, every loss becomes a lesson, every delay becomes protection, and every closed door redirects towards something greater. People can't sabotage what they didn't design. They may try to discourage you, discredit you, or derail you, but the authority over your life doesn't rest in their hands, it rests in God's, and while human approval may open doors, it's divine favor that keeps them open. It's favor that shields you from unseen dangers, that elevates you in seasons you didn't expect, and that sustains you when others count you out. Favor isn't earned through perfection, it's released through surrender. It comes when you stop trying to orchestrate outcomes and start trusting the one who already wrote the ending. Sometimes God will intentionally remove certain people from your life, not as punishment, but as protection. Not everyone can handle where you're going. Not everyone has the integrity, loyalty, or vision to walk with you through every chapter. Some were only assigned to your past, and if allowed to stay, they would hinder your future. And while their exit may hurt, it ultimately preserves what God is building in you. Destiny isn't just about reaching a destination, it's about becoming who you're meant to be along the way. And every loss, every heartbreak, every betrayal shapes you, strengthens you, and strips away what's unnecessary. When destiny is anchored in God, you no longer live at the mercy of circumstances. The economy may shift, relationships may falter, opportunities may dry up, but your purpose remains intact. The world can't cancel what heaven has ordained. The weapons may form, but they won't prosper. The storms may rage, but you won't drown, because what you carry inside you was placed there by hands that don't make mistakes, and those same hands will sustain you when the applause dies, when the crowds disperse, and when the road narrows. The beauty of placing your destiny in God's hands is that you learn to value obedience over opportunity, peace over popularity, and purpose over performance. You stop measuring your progress by human timelines and start trusting divine timing. You realize that detours often lead to destinations you didn't plan but desperately needed, and you stop fearing failure because you understand that every setback is still under God's control. Nothing is wasted. Every tear, every disappointment, every unanswered prayer carries weight in the process of becoming. People may forget your name, overlook your worth, and underestimate your potential, but God never will. He sees the battles no one else notices. He hears the prayers you pray in silence. He knows the fears you don't speak aloud, and He's already made provision for the very things you're worried about. When destiny rests in His hands, you can face uncertainty with steady steps, knowing that what's ahead is greater than what's behind, and what He's promised will come to pass in its appointed time. A man who trusts God with his destiny no longer chases validation. He no longer compromises his values for temporary gain. He no longer fears the opinions of those who misunderstand him, because he knows the one who called him is faithful. The one who designed him is intentional, and the one who holds his future is undefeated.